And this is it, folks, the final build of pack number 16. We're ending with a bang, the R32 Calsonic Skyline race car. Of course, a legend of Gran Turismo, not necessarily among the absolute quickest of Skyline race cars, but still a fantastic car in its own right. Probably one of the most iconic Skyline races as well. As far as the livery, some aficionados will notice that the wheels aren't quite accurate to real life. They look good with the gold, but it should have more like a powder coat white, or you could say grey or silver maybe, in Gran Turismo's past. So if you want to try and change those, of course you could. I've just left it as it came, and of course loads of different players have done liveries for this one. It is in this form based on the 1990 shape R32 NISMO version, because of course you do have a couple of different R32s to choose. I went for that one because it's more appropriate for the car. If you do want to build it on the other version, then of course you could. You might have slightly different results in terms of what parts you need to fit. You can still use, as I am, Gran Turismo 6 as the reference point if you wanted to, and obviously your point level will probably be a little bit different on the other car as well. So I haven't double checked that, but at least in theory you should be able to do it. Now, as far as the parts, if we jump into the tuning shop first of all, we have, of course, being a race car, a focus on racing parts for the most part, but given that it's about 540 horses, you don't really have to go too crazy with it. Now we're going to jump into the ultimate section first, because you want your high lift S cams, which of course counteracts the lower ones. We've got the titanium rods and pistons as well. Then if we go back to the sports section, of course you want your stage 1 weight. You've got the sports hard tyres fitted anyway, so don't worry about that. For the club sports, like I said, the higher up cams cancel those out anyway. You want your stage 2 weight, of course, the power restrictor and ballast. For the semi-racing stuff, I've gone for the low RPM turbo, which, some people might prefer the high or the mid. You're going to have to restrict the car differently if you want to use those, at least if you want to get it to Gran Turismo 6's numbers, as I have. For this one, as you can see, it lines up perfectly, 542 with 1260 kilos, but, each to their own in terms of how you want to get there. And one of the reasons why I went for the low as well is because it gives you that instant punch out of a corner with no lag at all. We've got the fully customised ECU, the racing crank as well. We've got the limited slip diff. I've gone for the fully customised manual box. Some might prefer the sequential in the next section, which of course will get through the gears quicker, but it seemed more appropriate to have that kind of raw old school feel. Plus it sacrifices the points a little bit, which can sometimes come in handy. We've increased the body rigidity. You don't need to do the stage 3 weight on this one, interestingly. As far as the racing stuff, I've purchased anti-lag, but I haven't actually turned it on. So you've got it there if you want to use it. If you don't want to buy it at all, then you don't necessarily have to. We've got the polished ports, balanced tuning, the race intercooler filter silencer and manifold, the pads and the discs. I say it every time, but you can choose which discs, of course, you want to go for. The torque vectoring diff, the clutch and flywheel, fully customised suspension. There's the transmission, of course. Like I said, you could go for it if you want to. It will jump you up quite a lot in terms of points, though, but it will potentially be a bit quicker, so, you've got to decide what you want there. The racing hard tyres are what I fitted there, of course. For the extreme section, the steering angle adapter to help with that turn-in. And then, of course, we already checked out the ultimate section just now. So the car itself is pretty much the most expensive thing to do about the build. But in terms of a replica, I would imagine if you haven't already done this, you were probably already thinking about it. And I think many of you probably have built at least something like this because it's such an iconic car. So we've got the racing hards fitted, of course, for the suspension, 95mm on the front and the back, 4 for anti-roll, 30 and 40 for the dampers, 2.85 for the springs. 1 degree of camber I've got on the front with half a degree on the rear. That kind of encourages the back end to slide out just a little bit more because of course you've got huge amounts of grip anyway, and sometimes having that slightly slippier back end can help you with the turn in. As far as the toe, I've got a little bit on the front, towed out 0.5, towed in 0.20 on the rear. Again, with 4-wheel drive, you could change the front to be towed in instead to have even more turn in, but I didn't want to make the car too twitchy, so you could try that if you wanted to, tow in, tow out, see which you prefer. As far as the diff, I've got 1010, 30, and a 50-50 split. Won't necessarily be to everyone's taste, but I personally really like that. The only advice I would give there, or the only warning, is this car loves low-speed corners, it loves mid-speed corners, but you'll see in a second on Spa, the kind of really long, sweeping curves, especially those couple of compound lefts toward the end of the lap, you'll really feel some of that understeer kicking in. The car does not like long, curved corners like that. It prefers really tight stuff. So, you know, like if we had Hong Kong, for example, it would be great on that track because it loves those kind of really tight, like 90-degree angle kind of corners. As far as the transmission, I've gone for a modest ratio, 330, so well over 200 miles an hour. As far as the ballast, you want 56 kilos, which of course will be if you're using Gran Turismo 6 as a reference, as I am. I've put that 50% toward the back, which is still way more over the front end, 56.44. 99% is what you want on the power restriction, 81% on the ECU. Now, I forgot just now, but I had the intercooler purchased, but you actually don't want to fit it. Because you can see if you do fit it, the power is too high, and that was back from the planning stage when I was, you know, fitting various parts to see how we could get us the exact right numbers. So that's a slight correction there. You don't actually need the intercooler at all. So by this point, you've probably already bought it, but it's not that expensive anyway. Or if you haven't, then don't bother. That's easy enough. 81% on the ECU. You can't adjust the downforce, which is kind of a shame. Thankfully, obviously, four-wheel drive makes up for that for the most part. Like I said, the anti-lag is turned off. And over here, you can see everything else. And all things considered, for a Skyline with over 500 horses, barely 1,250 kilos, and racing tyres, to be 660 points seems quite OP. So on that point, now of course we need to take it out to the track and show you what it can actually do. Now, of course, I already kind of spoiled it just now by saying that this car really loves low and mid-range stuff, some high-end stuff, but it's the super long sweeping curves where you can feel that understeer start to creep in. Now, some of that, of course, is changeable. If you find it to be too heavy for you, there are two things which I would recommend. Try reducing the torque split to maybe like a 40-60 instead of a 50-50. And of course, you can do that while you're driving anyway. Personally, I like a 50-50 because it's more consistent, even if it does have understeer, because you know it's going to, if you know what I mean. The other thing I would recommend trying is what I said about the toe angle. On the front, if you toe in just a little bit instead of towing out to like 0.5 in. Now the trade-off to towing in is sometimes under really heavy braking, it will become a bit unstable and the front end might get a bit squirrely. So you'll need to bear that in mind. It swings and roundabouts in terms of what you want to gain and what you want to sacrifice, and also it'll depend on what kind of tracks you want to use the car on. At the end of the day though, it's a Godzilla, it's a Calsonic, it's a legend. So it's going to be quick, it's going to be really good. And I always like to do pretty much one car that is just way quicker than anything else in the pack. This time around it's this one. There's always like that one-star hypercar or race car in these builds, and this week it's this one. So leaving it until last was something a bit different. If you do decide to use it, you're going to enjoy it. You know, you can't not enjoy a car like this. So I hope you've enjoyed the week of special projects. If this is the first one you've clicked on, of course check out the other ones. And this is pack number 16 at the end of the day, and I'm still getting people, and this shows how broken YouTube is, clicking on these trailers, like for pack number 16, and asking what this is. And they've been subscribed for like 5-7 years. So it shows how broken the inbox is. Regardless of that, pack number 16 of course means there are over 160 cars at this point, so there's plenty to enjoy if you haven't checked them out already. People do keep saying, of course, about updating some of the older builds because of the physics changes. I may well do that in future, but the problem is I don't want it to feel like I'm just doing kind of a lazy recycling of stuff, and obviously the amount of time that it takes to go over loads and loads of builds and remake them is pretty substantial. I'll have to maybe think up some way of rolling them out in a way that doesn't feel that way. In future, that's another thing to do at another time. Of course, I will be back with a fresh pack, most likely next month. Now, of course, we'll have to wait for what Polyphony does later this month with the new update, the Formula car, the Hyundai Ioniq. I'll have to see what else is in there, hopefully. Maybe a new track, probably not, we'll see. And, of course, I hope you enjoyed pack number 16. See you in future for more, and thanks for watching.